There's a subject matter I've wanted to talk about for a little bit of time. And again, I couldn't really think about when was the right time to bring it up or even what were the right movies, shows, just media to talk about with it. And the past couple weeks, the second season of Last of Us 2 just came out, and I noticed the score for it, which was not surprising, certainly, but I think this feels like a right time to talk about because the score, at least on Rotten Tomatoes, was the critics overwhelmingly liked. And again, we're only 2 episodes in. I think at that point it was only 1 episode in. And the audience was very, very mixed, to say the least. And I think last time I saw it, it was at like 52% or 54%, something like that, which, isn't awful, but it's still technically over half. But it's not overwhelmingly positive either. It's still seen as rotten on Rotten Tomatoes, and I think that makes sense, a lot of people debate that too. It's like, well, wait, if it's over halfway through, I guess it depends on the pessimist side, but I always kind of say, well, would you recommend if somebody wrote something amazing and say, you gotta say it's a C minus, bit of writing, like, would you really recommend that? So I see why if something still has like the majority positive, it's still not necessarily seen as positive. But anyway, and it brought me back to when the game came out, and there was put it lightly, a similar reaction. And I think what I really want to talk about with this and a few other bits of media here in terms of movies and shows is what I call the religion of a fandom. I was very careful to use the word religion and not cult. Cult usually implies that it's coming from something that only wants to take advantage of others. And me personally, I don't see religion as that way. I think I'm sure some people start some religions to do that. Again, I can't see that as a cult. But the actual root, the actual center of it is a good place. Is something that's very, very strong and important and, should be looked at and, talked about in different interpretations and see how it can help people, stuff like that. And I think you can do the same thing with bits of art, not just art, but different forms of art. Like I said, movies and shows, music, all that. And my big thing, obviously, is movies and shows. So I wanted to talk about some fandoms that, yes, you could definitely say have had a backlash in the past. Like any fandom of any type of media, that's run a very, very long time is going to have. But there's something very unique about the ones I'm bringing up today. And for me, I think it comes down to interpretation, whether it be too many interpretations or lack of interpretation, or maybe just interpretations not matching. And I find that very, very fascinating. And I'm starting off with Last of Us because obviously it's, something that's on right now. At the time I'm recording this, there's only been 2 episodes. I have seen both of them. And I will also, I think it makes a big difference to say what I thought of the game. I got about halfway through the game. I know what happens, and I'm not someone that, spoilers, don't spoil it. I don't care. Well, I guess I prefer not to know going into something, certainly, but if I do know, I'm good at usually separating it, just being like, okay, forget I know this. I'm very imaginative. I can pretend that stuff pretty easily. And still see if it works or if it doesn't work. But pretty much I got through half of the game, and I won't go into spoilers for the game or the show, but I do remember thinking to myself, it's not bad, it's just underwhelming. And before the game came out, again, I won't go into spoilers, but there was a big reveal that came out about what the game is about before it was released or anything. I really do think that's a shame when that happens. I really think that's not fair to the people that made it. But to be fair, I think we'll have had the same reaction anyway, even if the leak didn't come out. And when I heard that there's a big surprise that happens there's a big surprise to a lot of people that happened very early on in the second game that made people very, very angry, and they felt betrayed, and they don't understand what this is about and everything. And to me, again, without going into spoilers, I was upset because it was the most obvious choice to go. It was the most generic route to go. And when I finally got to playing this game, I was enjoying playing it and everything. And I got to that scene and it kept going, and I'm just continuing the story and everything and the characters. And, I'm invested enough, but compared to the first one where I thought was such a perfect standalone game, I really thought, man, this could go in so many better directions, new original directions, and it's just kind of going the very generic route. What surprised me big time about this is, again, I think when I saw the pushback from it about the big leak of the reveal, I remember thinking to myself, well, okay, yeah, I guess they were hoping it was going to go a different direction too, something more fresh, more new, not just this generic route. And that wasn't it. They were so surprised, shocked that this was the route it was going, and I was so confused, and I was so, like, I could see someone not knowing it was going to go this route, but then adding on top of that, they were angry. They were so pissed off at this. To me, it's the equivalent of saying, did you know Obi-Wan dies in Star Wars? Can you believe it? I so didn't see that guy. That made me mad. That made me so mad. Like, if you were 5, maybe, but I feel like maybe the people got angry were 5, I don't know. But I feel like the majority of people that saw, have seen other stories and movies and just kind of knows how typical storytelling goes, this is just the route it normally kind of takes. And what it got me thinking about, this is where it all kind of spawned, is that my interpretation of Last of Us, the game, before we even get to the show, I thought you could look at that first game and you could see several different things in it, which I like. You get to that ending, again, I won't spoil, but you get to that ending and there's different things you can read of. Is this a good thing? Is it a bad thing? Is there even a good thing, bad thing about this? I really thought it showed both the selflessness and the selfishness of mankind, and I love that. And I think for several people who saw the game, who played the game, they didn't necessarily see both. They saw, no, it is only this one thing. And, maybe a little wiggle room, if even that, but it's mainly this one thing. And once more, you see that a lot, certainly with religions, something that's trying to get across something good and peaceful and how to be a decent person, how to survive this world, reach a higher realm, through usually something that's very positive and very good and spreads good. And somehow we'll fight holy wars over that. Terrible thing, torture, all this stuff will happen under the name, of being good. And people, I think, or hopefully, would see that as, a misinterpretation of, as something that's supposed to spread something that's good. And sometimes I see something kind of similar happening in fandoms where we get to a work of art that really connects to us, and it connects to us so much that we attach a lot of our identity to it. And possibly, or very likely, because it helped shape our identity. A lot of us grew up with, the Star Wars and video games, all this stuff. And I'm sure it helped shape who we are, and we really took a lot from what we interpreted this piece of media as saying. So when something comes along that does not match that, even to the point where, like I said, I thought it was very obvious where that this was the route it was going to go, and that's why I didn't get into it, because I thought it was too obvious. People can look past that, and they can only see what they attached to it and what it means to them, and they can't necessarily see what other people might have gotten out of it. They think very clearly is saying this one thing. And it isn't always, or at the very least, even if you ask an artist what an artist was trying to get across, it may not always match what you see. And I don't always see that as necessarily a bad thing. I think it is good to have those interpretations. I've talked about this panel before, but a lot of times at conventions we do a panel called Movies Everyone Disagrees With You On, where we very much open it up to the crowd. We say, name a movie either you hate and everybody loves, or you love and everybody hates. And the goal is always to show people, they get up and they'll say, I don't know, I love Batman Robin. Everyone will go, oh, like that. Or sometimes they'll go, all right. Like there's actually some other people who agree. Either way, you hear why they enjoyed it or they hated it or whatever. And you find out about the person. What I like is they bring a point of view maybe you didn't consider before. And I always thought that's something that should just be applied to a lot of things. I mean, don't get me wrong, there's some things where it's just you're not gonna really move the mark, or maybe you shouldn't change your mind on. Like I said, there are a few definitives out there, but a lot of it is very gray. And I like art, I like movies, I like songs, I like shows, I like books, I like all this stuff, because it does examine those gray areas. I think the best ones, while there are some that are very direct, I'm finding more and more, maybe just because I'm bombarded by the direct commentary, the more vague commentary you can read more into. And like I said with the first Last of Us game, I think you could really look at that and read a couple different interpretations. So by the time I got around to the second one, I think people had a very clear mindset of what that game was about, and suddenly it was either challenged or maybe reinforced, or maybe, like I said, kind of done a little too obviously, where I felt like it didn't really add anything continuing that story. Honestly, I'll be honest, because they already announced there's a season 3 of Last of Us being made, which is interesting. I will wait for season 2 to wrap up, but I like that because there's not a third game. And I like to see it go a different direction. I like to see it go more in a direction of like, well, what are they going to... Do they read more into, the bite and why, she survived that and everything and she didn't get infected? Or is she going to find out she got to do something with this and everything? Like that is more interesting to me than the story that we've heard a million times where somebody wants to get revenge. And the, studying revenge and stuff. I feel like we've just analyzed that to death. And they didn't bring anything, in my opinion, that new. And again, this is coming from someone who didn't even hate the second game. I just found it kind of underwhelming. And with the show now, I find myself, again, without going into spoilers, there's really only 2 things that have stuck out so far. And again, it is only, the first 2 episodes, but the Catherine O'Hara scene, because that's Catherine O'Hara and she's amazing and everything. And the fight in the middle of the second episode. Those were the 2 where I'm like, whoa, that was good. That stood out. Everything else, even though, a lot of the acting's good and it's directed fine and everything, it's just very, very generic and run-of-the-mill. It's just exactly where I figured a story like this would go. I can't pretend I went into the game necessarily, like, predicting exactly what was going to happen. Like, they're going to make a Last of Us 2. And if you were to ask me, what do you think is going to happen? I wouldn't know. But if you told me, what's just the most predictable, generic, run-of-the-mill thing you think would happen? I would predict that story. Almost beat for beat. The one thing maybe I couldn't predict was the different point of view, the switch around halfway through. And even then, once you know they're doing that, it's like, well, okay, I know what they're going to do. Can we, to quote, Joel in this last episode, can you shut the F up, just get it over with? I kind of have that mindset because I already know what they're going to do. And I'm so impressed with that first season because I really thought the first season wasn't going to work because you needed that game-playing element to it. Because this has already been seen so many times in other zombie stuff. My wife was watching a little bit, but she's seen a little bit of the game, played a bit, and then, but doesn't know a ton about it. So when the show came on, she's on the same page as me. She's kind of sick of like zombie stuff and everything, and not even that it's bad. It's just there's too much of it, just overload. And the first season, she would sort of walk in and out, watch it, and she would get sucked in. This season, we're now only 2 episodes in. She's just like, this is Walking Dead. This is Walking Dead, right? I mean, is there any different? And I'm like, that's the problem. I feel like they brought like a freshness to the first season and even that first game that was really, really new. Last of Us is the only game I can think of where I did, for lack of a better way of putting it, forget it was a game. Like, I would always look over my shoulder to make sure Ellie was behind me, and I kept having to remind myself, it's pixels. She's always going to be there. If you complete the goal, she's always going to be there, and she's programmed to always be there. And I got so wrapped up in the game and just, working with this character and who your character was, that they did seem very, very real. And actually, a scene like that did happen in the second one, where one of the characters makes a reveal to someone else, to the lead, about halfway through the halfway point, if that makes... So the first half is one story, and then halfway through that story, somebody makes a reveal, and I do remember thinking to myself, what are you, crazy? Why would you do that? What are you, nuts doing that? Blah, blah, blah. And then I realized, she's not real. Like, I do love when a game can do that, and that's why I too put so much value in, not just games and movies and stories, all that, because they can really transcend all that. I mean, you can just be in your room doing nothing, and then suddenly you have these incredible emotions and these incredible feelings and these characters you really, really connect with, and you can learn something about yourself through these. I think that's so powerful and that's so interesting. And again, I do feel like that's kind of what religion is supposed to do as well. So, and like religion, though, there can be many pros and there can be many cons. If you're using it to, promote something that's very healthy and positive and about love and, all that good stuff, then yeah, it's probably something good. If you're using it as an excuse to hate others or get out your aggression, or, you're not getting your anger out, your negativity out, something else, that's healthy, but instead you're using this as a scapegoat, to throw your anger at, that's probably not healthy. And sometimes I feel like that happens with fandoms. So I feel like I talked about Last of Us a fair amount here. I want to go into another one. This one's kind of old, but it definitely still ties in. I mean, when people say a fandom that's a religion, what's the first thing that pops into your head? Star Wars. Absolutely. So this one's going to be a little obvious. I'll try not to spend too much time on it. I don't even know how long I've been talking here, but I think people, have made jokes about this, have gone on and on about how people treat Star Wars like a religion, and we're at a very interesting point now with it, because again, you start off with the first movie that, yes, has a very heavy lean towards myth, but it's a hodgepodge of a whole bunch of stuff. Obviously Flash Gordon, a little bit of Kurosawa in there. Yes, classic myths, but also fairy tales in there too. And myths and fairy tales are very different. There's a lot of bleed over, obviously, but they are very different. So what people always miss, I find interesting, if you were to say, well, what's the best Star Wars movie? Well, most people agree Empire Strikes Back, hands down, easily the best one. But every movie after the first one, even the first one a little bit later, the longer it stayed out, it got a little bit of pushback, but every single Star Wars movie, in one way or another, got pushback. Empire, out of the original three when they first came out, I believe made the least money. The first one obviously made a bundle, and Return of the Jedi made a bundle, but the second one was still a big hit, huge hit, and everybody was talking about it, but there were people saying, well, that was kind of a downer, I want it to be more upbeat, fairy tales, or Save the Princess, and all that stuff. What's this whole thing about, the big reveal with the bad guy in there? Again, I won't, most of you know it, but I'll be nice and not give it away just in case, But that element also challenged a lot of people. I think for a lot of people, thinking it was just this very basic fairy tale type story, I mean, down to the good guy wears white, the bad guy wears black, suddenly there is that element that it suddenly challenges people. And one of my favorite things to watch is, I'm sure you've seen these YouTube compilations of kids watching that movie for the first time and getting to that big moment and filming their reaction. I mean, it's great. It's so great to see them suddenly challenged. What do you mean? Like it so doesn't click in their head. And for me, funny enough, again, I didn't predict it, but when it got to that point, I was a kid when I saw it too, I was like, oh yeah, that sounds right. That kind of makes sense. So it wasn't something like I saw, but it wasn't like the biggest shock in my life or anything like that. And again, it's just one of those where I'm like, okay, yeah, because the first Star Wars is good and this movie is good. So when I'm told that, I'm like, yes, this seems like the good route to go. This is interesting. This is challenging. Where is it going to go from here? And then you got to the third one, which again, people, I think you still kind of know the complaints. There's too many puppets in there. The Ewoks are kind of distracting. Some of the characters, like especially Han Solo, a lot of people said was a little too lighthearted and, goofing up too much and everything. But, it's still pretty positive. And then you have the prequels, which obviously we all know what people, man, we don't know what all people think. They used to be universally hated, and now there's people that are really defending them quite a bit, which I find a little odd. But I think Clone Wars helped with that. But yes, yeah, every single movie at some point got some pushback. So the one that I feel like was the most Maybe the two. The two that were the most like religion, I think, was very much in terms of going on like kind of the stages of religion was probably the prequels, because there were a lot of people when it came out that just liked it because it was Star Wars. Even if they knew it was bad or were in denial of it. There's a very funny movie called The People versus George Lucas that talks all about this, and it's very, very entertaining. And I think when you saw people react to that and wait in line, for days and weeks and weeks, like the second coming of the Messiah kind of thing, you definitely could see that religious aspect, definitely like not in the best of light, but definitely not in the worst. We've seen it far worse. And speaking of which, let's get to the far worst, when that would be probably the release of The Last Jedi. And I think people forget when the first film came out, the first of the new sequel trilogy. When that first came out, it was mostly positive, but again, there was a little bit of that mix of that backlash in there. And it definitely, for me, I had an issue with the fact that there was so much repeating in there of what worked before. And again, I'm like, well, okay, cool, it shows you can do a bare bones Star Wars, and now let's take it somewhere new. Let's do like what Clone Wars did and actually really examine this idea and this world and see what you can do with it. So when Last Jedi came around, when I first saw it, I really, really liked it. And then if you watch the review of me, actually, the sibling rivalry of me talking with Rob, I can't remember his sibling rivalry or Disney December, I can't remember, but there's one where we both sit down and we talk about it, and as I'm talking about it more and more, I did see more to the faults, and that's why I like discussing this stuff, because there were still things that I said, man, were great, and I had butterflies in my stomach. I haven't felt that in a Star Wars movie in years. But then the more and more I was talking about a lot of the side stuff, I was like, wait, why this? Does that make sense? This didn't seem to go anywhere. Why was this set up? And a lot of stuff did start to crumble a little bit for me, but I still liked the movie. And the stuff that, again, I was hearing it was getting backlash, and I sort of figured, well, okay, maybe it'll be these few things that, I also had a little bit of an issue with. But it wasn't it. It was the stuff, again, that I thought was very obvious was going to happen. A lot of people lost their minds when Luke threw the lightsaber behind him, and I'm thinking to myself, if this was after Return of the Jedi, maybe. And even then, I think because I don't know. I don't know if it's, I don't want to say I know storytelling, because it's like, no, a lot of us do. A lot of us, I think are very good at critiquing it and talking about it. I just feel like when you have a character like Yoda who banished himself, and then you have this new sequel series, this new trilogy that's... yes, they're calling, saying they agree. This new sequel trilogy that starts off, Luke Skywalker is missing, and this evil order has taken over, and Han and Leia are broken up. To me, that's... if you're going to have a problem with something, in a strange way, I have more respect for people that had a problem with Force Awakens right off the bat, and then didn't like Last Jedi. Because I can see someone saying, no, this is done. This is complete. We don't need to know anymore. If it's going to go in a different direction, this does not feel the right direction. That was set up clearly to have Han and Leia be together and live happily ever after. And as soon as you see they're broken up, like I said, I can see someone being like, hey, that wasn't the original intent. That wasn't the original idea. And I can see that. For me, I was like, well, I like Star Wars. I'm not obsessed with it, but I do like it. I've seen most things Star Wars, so, I was open enough to it. I guess, all right, the story has to keep going. Let's go this route. But maybe that's why when it got to that big moment where he tossed the lightsaber, I'm like, well, yeah, he banished himself. I just assume he's letting all these people die and everything in this battle. That, all right, that this is just sort of where he is. And if Han and Leia are broken up, this is just kind of the bitter reality that is sunken in, which is also a reason I didn't mind it too much. Like, well, yeah, we have the fairy tale world, but now we're bringing in this harsh reality that can interrupt that. Again, kind of like the reveal of the villain in Empire Strikes Back, where, well, no, this was very clearly good versus evil. Well, now there's this complication thrown in. So I was a bit more open to it. But people got so angry at it, and it was just not what they saw. I mean, that hashtag was going everywhere. Not my Luke Skywalker. It was so not what they connected with that character. And not only that, I mean, let's be honest, it's not what they connected to what they saw as the best of like humanity in this world, or what they associated with something very powerful, very strong, hopeful, optimistic. And again, I feel like they put a lot of their identity on that character as well. Most likely because that character probably did help shape them. Again, a lot of kids grew up watching Star Wars. I did, certainly. When I was a kid, I kind of saw Luke Skywalker as, the young kid in over his head, but he's going to grow and everything. And now as an adult, I'm like, this punk's a little annoying. Not even a punk. He's like a dweeb. He's like this whiny little dweeb. And now I feel like everybody kind of makes fun of that. But when you're a kid, you see him as the wide-eyed innocent, going on this amazing adventure. So you do attach so much of your identity on there. Certainly, especially if you grew up with it. And you're going to think of those nostalgic connections to it. So when you have this bitterness suddenly sneak in, that I guess Mark Hamill did try to warn them, like, to his credit, he seems to know the fan base. He's like, they're not going to like this. And I don't know if I would have believed it, going off of Force Awakens, where people seem to be okay with Han and Leia, being broken up. Like, that was the biggie for me. If we're going to do this, all right, then we better commit. This is the angle we're taking, kind of thing. But, he did predict that people were going to be very, very angry about it. So again, it's not that I can see people having a disagreement about it, that's where they don't think Luke Skywalker should go, or Han Solo should go, or Princess Leia, all of them. It's more the anger, the absolute, no, I know how this works. I know how storytelling works and everything, and, where this should go, and that's always where I kind of go, do you? Because I do sometimes wonder how much people are connecting themselves to the character. It's not even necessarily a bad thing, as long as you can come back, as long as you can see, from a storytelling standpoint, that this angle, what it's trying to do, and that it makes sense to try and go this angle, or at the very least, you can see what it's trying to accomplish with it. Again, with Star Wars, there's a lot of different angles you can go with it, and I still thought the stuff with a lot, not all, but a lot of, Luke and Rey and Kylo Ren in that second movie was very interesting. I thought some stuff did evolve. I thought other things kind of de-evolved, almost on purpose. But yes, I felt like the anger that people got over something that I feel like has been done time and time again in stories. I think that's where I really draw the fascination between people treating a fandom as a religion and not as just art or just a story. Even just art, that sounds weird to say. Art's very powerful, but religion, I think you could argue, is trying to be above that. It's really trying to, I feel like art is trying to lead you to being, greater than you are, where religion, I feel like, in a much more direct way is trying to do that. Or art is also trying to help you understand life or see the good side, the bad side, whatever, where I think the idea of religion is that it's trying to lead you to, this ultimate great, like the ultimate amazing thing, whatever that is, heaven, enlightenment, all that stuff. So I think there is definitely a difference, but the idea of treating it like a religion, the idea, well, I'm angry at this because you don't represent what my interpretation of this is, where I can definitely see I don't like this because I disagree, and again, there is a difference between those two. If you're going to say, I hate this and so should you ruined it, blah, 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 I kind of go, well, but I don't know. When the prequels came out, a lot of people said, George Lucas ruined my childhood. And my argument is always, if that's all it takes to ruin your childhood, you didn't have a childhood to ruin. You had very little childhood to mess up. I think you're still there, kind of thing. But I can definitely see, how often have we made fun of the prequels? Over and over and over. And we made fun of the new sequel trilogy as well. It's not like we're, at a loss for material. So I think there's definitely an element there where it is fun, and it is interesting, it is insightful to get wrapped up in these stories. And especially in these stories that have been around for so long and now can have and just have different connections for different generations now, which is so interesting. I mean, now there's people, I guess, showing the prequels first, or showing the prequels and then Clone Wars and then the original Star Wars, and that is just so baffling to me, because I feel like that's not how it's meant to be seen. But, and you're going to ruin so much. I mean, why is that big reveal in Empire Strikes Back going to be that big a deal if you show them in the, episode 1, 2, 3, and so on? So, because of that, we saw obviously something happen with the sequel trilogy. I mean, that was just so obvious, which was the backlash for Last Jedi was so strong, they just completely caved to the fans and tried to do everything in their power to give them what they wanted and not have a clear vision of what they thought would work. Because, I mean, to the people who made Last Jedi's credit, I mean, they had an idea whether you agree with it or not, and I can definitely see why people would not like it. Like I said, I point out a lot of things that haven't worked about it too, but it was somebody that definitely had an idea. And even I pointed out, but there's not much left for a third one. You know what I mean? Like that one almost wrapped up. You know, it's like, is there really that much else to do? But I can still see, like, this person had an idea. He wanted to take it this angle. But as I said before, it was not planned from the first film, which it probably should have been. And by the time it got to the third one, they tried to, appease the people, and it totally blew up in their faces. Well, not financially. I think it made bank, but people usually see that. Well, at least everyone I know either sees it as, either diehard Star Wars fans or casual Star Wars fans or just movie-going fans don't like that movie. And they do feel like it's trying to appease too much to the complaints of the last film. So even when you try to do that, it doesn't quite work. And in a strange way, I hate that it had to be that trilogy that happened with, because I would have liked to see a trilogy good from beginning to end. But it does show what happens when the people complain so hard. Again, they treat it like a religion. Well, this will make us happy. And then when you try it, nope, no, it doesn't. I'm not even saying that's necessarily the fans' fault. I mean, this is, like I said, every Star Wars movie to some extent got backlash. I mean, like, The Last Jedi was one of the more extreme ones, certainly. But there were definitely people who were praising it. It was not short people who were praising it either. But at the same time, I think it is good to see what happens when somebody, especially halfway through, and I'm halfway through at the ending, just decides to totally change direction, which you could argue kind of already did with Last Jedi, but goes even further and just tries to make the fans happy. That doesn't seem like the right route to go. I feel like it is a balance of trying to get what people want to see and what you want to make. And there has to be some passion in there. There has to be something important to get across. And I don't think that was figured out from the beginning. Again, I've done videos about that before. But again, I feel like that does kind of lead to both the pros and cons, mainly cons, of looking at it as kind of a religion. But again, the fact that you can look at these characters, these works of art, you can attach so much of yourself the same way you can look at a painting, and you can attach so much of your emotions to, just a landscape or the colors used or an expression somebody has. There is something to that. And even these great religious stories and these parables and stuff like that, I mean, people talk about them still because there is so much connection to what people are constantly looking to become and looking to overcome. These are very important, impressive stories, for a reason. The last one I want to talk about, which is more like a last and a half, I have like sort of a half one to talk about at the end of this, but is one I was debating whether or not to talk about, but it is a more recent one, and I found it interesting, was Joker 2. And I really thought when I reviewed this movie, it was going to be like when I reviewed Guardians of the Galaxy 3. I didn't like that movie, but I didn't hate it. And people were very upset at that. I don't know if you necessarily throw that in the religion aspect, Guardians 3 or Marvel, necessarily, surprisingly, but maybe we'll get that. I say give it another 10 years if it's still going and they try to bring all this stuff back. Maybe with like the new Avengers movie coming out where they're bringing back a whole bunch of these cast members, maybe then we'll get that. We might get that religious aspect. That's not how you use that characters. That's not how you blah, blah, blah. But with Joker 2, I gave sort of the same thought that I'm like, I don't like this movie, but I don't hate it. There's good things in it, but I don't think it comes together. I don't think it works. And I really thought, again, I was trying to be kind of nicer to it, and I found out my negative review was actually one of the more positive reviews, because people just despised this movie. And again, to some extent, I saw what they were talking about, because I didn't think it quite worked either, but for them to see nothing good in it, I was kind of puzzled by. And the more I would hear people discuss it and even read things into it that I'm not saying I was right about, but certainly I didn't read into, was really fascinating. And there's certain elements, like, without, again, going too much into spoilers, some people have said, well, he's not really the Joker, somebody else is the Joker, they revealed at the end. And I was thinking about it, I'm like, is that what they were saying? I always sort of thought, like, the idea was always kind of around. Like, there will always be a Joker. Like, he started this thing that cannot be put back, kind of thing. I'm not even the biggest fan of that ending either. But it's one of those things where I kind of read it that way, not, hey, here's the literal Joker that this was supposed to be about, or, the one that's going to fight Batman or whatever. I'm like, I didn't interpret it that way, but a lot of people did. And with that said, too, there's a lot of stuff in the movie that people, probably rightfully so, were interpreting as a means to go back and make it very clear what the original Joker was trying to say. And my brother had a great line. I just love this line. He says, I hate it when dumb people misinterpret something because then smart people have to be punished. I thought that was so true, because I feel like there were so many people that looked at the first movie, I don't know, maybe not the majority, but I guess enough, who looked at it and saw something else going on, that this was a very pro something else movie. And I feel like the majority of people that watched it didn't see that, like they see the Joker as like a hero kind of thing. And it's like, I think the majority of people didn't see that, but because enough did, and whatever, shared it online or whatever, I don't know, they had to make this sequel where then they spell out what we're trying to do, and they just hammer it in the most obnoxious way, and they go back and they try to change certain things that were going on, which I guess if that's what you read out of the first movie and you saw that as an issue, maybe you like the second one, but it's one of those things where I really thought, like, because there were some different interpretations you could get out of it, and you weren't always sure what you were supposed to read from the scenario, that, or just the beginning, middle, and end, you weren't exactly sure what to read out of it or what to even think of the character by the end. I always thought that meant, well, there's a lot of different ways you can look at it, but then there's also different ways you can misinterpret it. And to me, that's much more of a risk, and it's an admirable risk. I guess years ago, I found this out recently when Clockwork Orange came out. Clockwork Orange is one of my favorite movies. And I guess there was a point where some kids were trying to reenact what the main characters in that were doing. And if I'm right, look at it, I could be wrong, but if I'm right, I thought I heard some theaters were not showing it anymore. They're trying to ban it. And Kubrick himself was like, yeah, that's a good idea. Like people's safety is more important, kind of thing. And it's one of those things where I think it's very clear that was not the intent of the movie, that what this character was doing was a good thing. I mean, very clearly not. But there were, I guess, people misinterpreting that. And that movie is still being talked about, still being praised, as just this phenomenal masterpiece. Like I said, it's one of my favorite movies, but not because we look at the main character and say that this is a good thing that he's doing. I mean, definitely not. It's a challenging movie because it's not always so black and white, and the answers are not always clear. What it does is that it raises these good questions, but I think where it gets difficult is that you have movies like Joker and Clockwork Orange that raise these very difficult questions. And then with Joker 2, you have it trying to give very obvious answers. And I don't think that's what sucked people in to begin with. Whether it's people who are misinterpreting the ideas or even getting the ideas, head on and seeing the possibilities of it. Nobody wants something that comes in and slaps you in the face and says, hey, here's what we're trying to say. We don't think you're smart enough to get what we're trying to say, so now we're going to spell it out as much as possible. And that's always difficult. I don't know what it would be like how I would feel if I was the filmmaker and I saw people misinterpreting what I was trying to get across to such an extreme that it was promoting something really, really bad. Again, to the point where we're seeing like the Joker in that movie is a hero. He's someone to look up to, kind of thing. I don't know what I would think of that. And maybe I would make the same choice, just having that fear or dread, So it's one of those things where when that second movie came out, I didn't hate as much as everyone else. But again, I think so many people attached so much to that movie, the first film, that they thought really showed this very complex, difficult life to watch that maybe some people saw some connection to, or at least knew people that were going through something similar. And again, the idea is not that he goes the route you're supposed to go. He's a bad guy. But yes, it does also very much make us question why we do have a fascination with bad guys, why do we like villains in films? Why are so many people obsessed with serial killers too? I mean, I think these are good questions to ask. And I think a movie like that does show, well, they do come from very complicated places that, kind of almost anyone can come from. And that's very disturbing. But it also shows how uplifting it can be that many of us don't, the majority of us don't fall into that. And I think when you have a movie like the sequel that comes out and tries to do a lot of other things wrong. The musical moments are not well done. And I was excited for it to be a musical, but they're not that well handled. A lot of the technicals don't add up. And again, on top of that, just the moral is so trying to spell itself out and do the opposite of what the first one did. That's not going to win anyone over. It's kind of like the switch, the reverse of Rise of Skywalker, where that one's trying to appease the fans, where this one's trying very much to say, no, we don't want this to be misinterpreted at all. We want this and nothing but this. And I think, especially in a time where we have so much direct commentary just spelling everything out, that's not what people are looking for. But at the same time, I will say out of all of them, this one seemed the less, the least aggressive, maybe? Like, people certainly hated this movie and they hated on it a lot, but I didn't see death threats or anything like that tossed around. Or I feel like with some of the other ones over the years, I've definitely seen that or at least heard about it. And who knows, maybe it did and they just, the people kept quiet about it, don't want to fuel the flames, I don't know. But the other nice thing about it, though, is that with all of these, with Star Wars and with Joker and with Last of Us, no matter what, we still have something great to go back to. We have the original, and some people say, some people really do like, Last Jedi and Last of Us 2 and Joker 2 and stuff like that. Again, for me, to varying degree, I actually do like Last Jedi, fine. But I see the things that don't work about it. And I just think it's important to not only look at something objectively, just really try, but to a point where you're also open to hearing other points of view. I mean, you could be hearing what I'm saying and be like, he is so wrong about something. You could be right. I mean, I like discussing stuff. I like opening up a conversation about it. No, it doesn't always have to be fisticuffs. But what I was getting to is that there's always going to be that original source material there. What sparked those initial ideas and those emotions and those feelings is still there. Even as much as Lucas tries to erase the original Star Wars, the original effects, no, this is my new version of blah, blah, blah. You can still go back to something pretty, I don't know, the VHS, maybe. I still have the VHS of the Star Wars trilogy, because I just don't know where else I'm ever going to be able to see it, if they don't release it. Maybe they did, I don't know, I can't follow all that, but I've seen it enough times at this point, I feel like I don't need to see it again. But yeah, I think that is the nice thing, is that you can't really go back and, as I was referring to before, put it back in the jar. You can't really go back and erase it. People always say with the Disney live-action remakes, look at them trying to erase the past and blah, blah, blah. I don't know if they are. Let me put it this way. Even if that's their intent, which I don't think it is, I think it's more they just want to make money on existing IP. If anything, they want you to remember the original so that you'll go see it. They're relying on that big time. they can't really get rid of it. It's always going to be out there, and we're always going to have a way. We're always going to remember the connection it made with us. And I think it's very good to have that, but it's also good to see the different connections it might have with other people. That's one of the reasons I love doing that Movies Everyone Disagrees With You On panel. I find it fascinating, the different points of view that people bring up. It isn't always just, oh, I like it because it's so bad, it makes me laugh, or I like it because of nostalgia. Some people really bring up some points of view that I'm like, that's a really interesting take. Like, I never thought about that. It makes me want to go back and watch a film again through completely different eyes. And there's definitely been movies I feel like I had a thought about, and I'll return to it and be like, whoa, this is something different now. Like, this didn't hit me before, and now it is. With that said, the last one I wanted to talk about, the half one, is because I was thinking about it. I said, well, I did Star Wars. I should probably do Star Trek. And the reason I say it's kind of a half one is because I realized with Star Trek, almost all the reactions I've heard about the shows, the movies, I mean, everything, I've almost always agreed with the fans on, like the diehard fans. And what's so funny is that I wouldn't consider myself like a diehard Star Trek, or I don't even know, it's Trekkie, Trekker, whatever it's called. I wouldn't consider myself like a diehard fan. But, you know, I have seen the movies. I've seen all of the most of the Next Generation episodes. I've seen most of the Deep Space Nine episodes. Some Voyager, and man, outside of that, I think that's it. You know, so I mean, where others have seen everything. And from what I've heard, anytime I saw something that I'm just like, I don't know if that's going to be my thing. Most Star Trek fans are like, yeah, it's not. You know, like Picard. I saw that, I'm like, I don't think this is going to be my thing, and I don't know if this is really going to be the type of Star Trek I remember. And most people said it was, but then it got better, apparently. So I'm fascinated about that. I actually kind of almost want to check it out just for that, to see it get better. But what makes that so interesting, Star Trek in general, is that, and, you know, you can tell I'm not a diehard fan because I never got into the original series. I get why people get into it. It does have good ideas. The campiness is fun. There are a lot of things that are clever about it, but it's not my kind of campiness. I just can't get into it. But when they went to movies, you had the first movie, everyone calls it the slow motion picture, because it's so slow, and it's obviously trying to do something like 2001: A Space Odyssey, which is not really what Star Trek was. But then you had the second movie where somebody was brought in to direct it and help write it, who had a very different take on Star Trek and that world. And again, the world is supposed to be, we got not just world peace, but universal peace. We got rid of money, we got rid of, you know, all stuff like that. We just want to explore, and we just want to advance all life, you know, kind of thing. Very optimistic. I get that. I get the appeal of that. Highly unrealistic. So this other guy came in when doing Star Trek 2 and said, yeah, okay, where's the wiggle room in there? What can we do with that? And the second movie, okay, at the panel I was talking about, the movies everyone disagrees with you on, somebody came up and said, I really don't like the Star Trek movies because I feel like it took Gene Roddenberry's original vision and it pushed it more military. And that's not what I thought that future was about. And he's not wrong. You know, there's definitely stuff in the original show. Again, it's very campy and the fight alien stuff. But the idea was exploring, was going and finding, you know, bringing this kind of peace to the world. If it needed to have that peace broader, if it made sense to bring in, again, all the, I don't know what you call it, Space Corps director or whatever. I think it was Red Dwarf I quoted. Anyway, but that's the main angle of it, where when Star Trek 2 started, that's more kind of modern Star Trek that I think a lot of us connect to for a long time. That's the direction the movies went. And it's not that it completely abandoned the original idea of exploration and that the world is, the universe has figured out, you know, a lot of things and is more peaceful now. But it definitely tried to search more for that wiggle room of conflict, because I think he knew conflict is the big element, and humanity is full of conflict. And if it became too much about well, we're just going to show what it's like to live a good life in the future. It's going to sound too preachy. It's going to sound like they're talking down to you kind of thing. Where I think when he showed there is still prejudice in the future. Kirk has a prejudice against like Klingons, in that show. But prejudice is supposed to be gone. There were already these complications happening in there. And the fans love to point out all the things that don't make it. They love to point out all the little film flubs and holes and stuff like that. And not in a way that necessarily is angry. Like this destroyed Star Trek. It was more kind of a fun thing where they're aware there's contradictions in there. And part of that might be because you had the original show and then it went into the movies, and they had a pretty big gap in between there too. And then the other shows came, Next Generation and so on, all the other spin-offs. So there's already kind of two very different versions going into it. And maybe that's kind of the same thing I always hear with like Doctor Who. There's it's been going on for so long, there's a bunch of different versions. So maybe those big gaps in between, where for a lot of things, it waits too long, where people can sit on it for too long and be like, inform their opinion, like this is what this truly is. I've attached too much of my identity to this. Maybe they wait just the right amount of time in Star Trek for people to, at a time where there also wasn't internet yet. I mean, people would just go to conventions and stuff like that. I mean, they had Star Trek. I think they still have Star Trek conventions. And, that was like always a big, big thing. So people could go discuss ideas and everything. So maybe that just worked out just well enough. And again, I could be wrong. Maybe there were some big moments in Star Trek history where like there was a lot of backlash about something that maybe didn't deserve it. And maybe that's kind of the angle I'm leaning towards here, is that something's getting backlash not because it deserves it, but because someone just couldn't see a unique point of view or an interesting point of view someone was trying to bring into this that could actually work and sometimes does work. They're just so focused on this one way it has to be. But with Star Trek, I think because not only was there that gap between the show and the movies, but then another show came out that's years and years later, and it shows how things have changed. So I feel like Star Wars was trying to do that at some point, just did in a much sloppier way, but then sometimes even better way. Again, you look at like Clone Wars. Clone Wars, I think, is a wonderful show. It's just very nicely put together. Even the first couple seasons that everybody craps on, I'm like, I don't think it was that bad. So I feel like, funny enough, the one that I feel like sort of began the making fun of fandoms and people obsessing over a show and a movie and so I mean, even the actor William Shatner did a very funny sketch on SNL making fun of like the fans and how obsessive they are and stuff like that. Ironically, maybe because they're one of the earliest ones, they're the ones I've seen the least amount of pushback from in terms of like when they do something that it could be unique for the series and could actually lead somewhere interesting, but then they do call out when something doesn't make sense. I mean, having, the characters in Picard drop the F-bomb left and right, like that doesn't make sense like in any universe. And I haven't seen the show, so maybe I shouldn't comment, but I've just heard bad stuff about it until it goes on. The only good thing I've heard recently that does make me, let me put it this way, I trust the fans enough that when they say Lower Decks is a good show, I believe them and I want to check it out because it looked bad. It looked like a bad show, but then everyone's kind of telling me, actually, it's pretty good. And also to where people say, no, if you want good modern Star Trek, like kind of what you remember it being like, watch The Orville. Like that's good modern Star Trek. It's just every episode is kind of like a comedic episode of Star Trek, but it's still Star Trek. So that's one of the things where bizarrely that seems kind of balanced out. If I'm reading everything right, because maybe I'm completely missing it. There could be a whole other section that I just completely missed about this obsessed fan base. And, it is obsessed, but that's fine. I mean, we all have, look at this room. I got plenty of obsessions myself. But, but it's funny that one, from what I've seen over the years, has kind of seemed the most healthy, bizarrely. It's kind of like when you go to a horror convention and a lot of the people are really laid back and nice. And it's like, well, I guess it makes sense. Their starting point is slashers killing people. If that's where you start, it's like, well, you've already started at like the worst possible thing you can think of. You can only go up from there, I guess. So I always found that kind of fascinating. So yeah, with that said, I'd love to know your thoughts on what you think of this idea that, some fandoms can become almost like a religion, or they're pros to that, or they're cons to that. I guess I mainly talked about the cons here, but again, I do think there are pros to it. Like I said, as long as you know it is not a religion, and as long as you know you can come back and be in the real world, and I don't know, for most things in terms of art, and you see me get upset at, movies and shows I feel like are missing the idea. I mean, the big one for me is probably the Disney live action remakes. I mean, there you go. Maybe Disney's my religion. Maybe that's my weird thing. But how many times I've made fun of them even before the live action remakes. But I think the big thing is that with any form of art or music, movies, shows, all that, is that the best thing to take out of it is just the good stuff. Take the things that are going to be inspiring to you and really help you grow as a person and look at things from a different point of view. Try to take that with you the most. And if there's something else that you don't connect with, or you think is bad, or you think ruins the idea, you can talk about it, but also be open to hearing other people talk about it. And yes, there's been plenty of times I've shared, why do you think this movie's so bad? I hate it because this. I hate it because that. And that's always kind of fun. But other times you can really connect to why something had such an impact on you. And maybe if somebody has a different opinion, you can find out a unique point of view on it that maybe you haven't considered. Even as much as I talk about a lot of the stuff being seen as like a religion and, very extreme, I find I do still get a different point of view on it. I didn't know Last of Us had this specific effect on people. I didn't know Joker had, maybe I did know a little bit about Joker, but I didn't know it had that specific effect. I definitely didn't know in Last Jedi that had that specific an effect on people, where if they did this with this character, people would feel betrayed. Like, I think that's all very fascinating to me, and I think it's interesting to discover. But again, discover and discuss. I don't think there should be, like anything like threatening violence, or anything like that. Because, again, it's like people say, well, is a movie just a movie or is it more? Is it art? It can be both. I say that all the time. The Mona Lisa, is it, one of the greatest masterpieces of all time, or is it a bunch of paint on paper? It's both. It can be both. Just take the best out of it that you can. Take what are the strongest elements of it and have it make you stronger, And I think deep down people know what that is, those elements that can actually make us more patient, more strong, more open, better listeners, better at focusing on certain things, and better at thinking outside the box. I think we just get so emotionally wrapped up in certain things that we can lose track of that. And I think there is great value to all this. It's great value in religion, it's great value in arts, great value in movies, shows, music, all that. And I always think it's sadly sometimes difficult to lose track of that, but maybe that's why we do have these discussions, is to still tell ourselves, hey, there is something good, even when we have, I don't know, Minecraft the movie or Snow White or whatever. Even Minecraft, I'm seeing people just see something completely different than what I saw there, and that's kind of interesting. It's kind of fun. Just, stop bringing in live chickens. Years from now, people are going to look back and be like, what the hell is he talking about? So, look it up. Anyway, thank you so much. Again, share some of the ones that you think have pros and cons and of fandoms, and some ones maybe you've gotten into. I think this is an interesting conversation to have. Thank you so much, and I'll see you next time. Take care.